Okay, we'll be watching the red number 3 in the area, and the blue number 3 has just gotten possession of the ball in the Blues end zone, so they want to go to the other end of the field where we can watch our red number 3. And as she comes out in the end zone, we see the other players. The red number 3 is the player most on the left side of the screen, and the blue number 1 that she should be marking up is right there with her. They have the whole field to go down. She wants to stay downfield of all the blue players, connect with the 1 as soon as she can, and just keep pushing that number 1 closer and closer to the sideline, but not out. So she connects pretty well. She is farthest. She is downfield of all the blue players right now, and she connects with that blue player very well and does work her right up to pretty close to the sideline before they go off the screen. And then they're off the screen for quite a while, and her teammates are putting a lot of pressure on the ball carrier, but her job is to stick with that number 1 and just be holding them to the side of the field, no matter how long it takes for their team to bring it down or possibly to change hands. So as all this is going on, the ball has come loose now, so it's a loose ball, but our player is not closest to it, so her job stays the same, and the blue team comes up with it again, so our red number 3's job is still the same, holding that blue number 1 up against the sideline. But she was off the screen. We didn't see what she's doing, but she has let the blue number 1 get right to the middle of the field, and she is between the 1 and the goal, I guess, trying to prevent her from getting into the end zone. Remember, you don't want to prevent them from getting in the end zone. You just want to make sure they go into the end zone near the side and not near the middle. And then once they get in the end zone, just hold them to that side. So she's pretty effective at holding that number 1 out of the end zone entirely, and the ball changes hand, or they lost possession, got it back again, and in the meantime, the number 1 has made it into the end zone and right in the middle of the end zone, in the middle of the field, I guess. So our number 3's job is to just be up against her, holding her to one side, and stay between her and the goal. When she's on the side of the field, she's between her and the goal by just holding her side, trying to hold her sideways. But when the number 1 is in the middle of the field like this, our number 3 should actually be more between her and the goal, and if she gets flat up against that 3, whichever way the 3 wants to go, she just encourages that 3 to continue toward that sideline, whichever one it is, and then continue trying to hold her to the sideline. But it looks like our 3 is kind of undecided on what she's going to be doing here. She should be first priority between that number 1 and the goal, and it looks like here she's trying to play between the 1 and the ball carrier, which isn't the way I would suggest to play, because if they get the ball, if you're not successful in intercepting the ball by playing between them, if they get the ball, you're not stopping them from getting to the goal. So here the number 1 has caught the ball. Our number 3 was behind because they were playing between the 1 and the ball carrier, and when the number 1 got the ball, she just was able to turn to the goal, and she's ahead, and there's not much the 3 can do. So at this point, the 3 has already lost the number 1, and from right about here, the number 3 should just give up chasing behind, following behind the 1, and head directly to the middle of the goal. But she stays up against that one, and since she was close to her, it would be very easy for the number one, and our number 3 was slightly behind, for our number 1 to connect up against our 3 and just control the 3 all the way up to the goal. And whatever she is, our 3 wasn't able to prevent her from running up to the goal and getting a shot at the goal.
They can't see it now, they see it. Oh, and Cat comes up with it. Makes a bounce. Waiting for Kiki to get open, but Tally is doing an amazing job of keeping Kiki off the field. Now it's going to be red all over blue right now. They're like white on rice right now, I tell you. They're looking to get Cat the ball. Cat Pages. Paige comes up with knocking the ball out. Liz goes for it. Liz comes up with it. Paige is giving it one. Hey, whoa! Paige has got some amazing long arms out there, and she could get somebody's racket from a long way out. And she did that very nicely. Cat's looking to pass it off to Liz. Liz was just behind her just a little bit too much, but she comes up with the ball anyway. She's looking for Kiki. Kiki. Look, Kiki, eyes open, there you go, nice.
Okay, we're watching the blue number 3 this time, and of course the black number 1 just took it in the area and now just has possession of it in the end zone. So our blue number 3's job is to stay between the number 1 and the goal, as close as possible to the number 1. And when she's done all that, then get crossways to a line that would run from her to the goal. And that is the ideal position. And in addition to that, be trying to work every time the number 1 faces a sideline, just make the number 1 go as close as possible to that sideline and hold them towards that side of the field and don't let them back to the middle. So she's staying between her and the goal now. Finally, well, here she's gotten too far forward, and she's not up against the number 1. She's had plenty of time to get up against the number 1, but she's not really trying to get up against the number 1. Looks like she's happy just being beside her, but you actually want to be always improving your position. If the 1 slows down or stops, you want to continue moving to improve your position every chance you get. And here she is a little bit too far forward and is not quite up against the number 1. And here the number 1 is able to get our 3 to actually step farther away from her. You can see from the shadows that she's got 2 or 3 feet at least between the 2 horses now, and the horse's front end of the body is even farther away. So she's not blocking nearly as much space, and she's not, since she's continues holding her racket out and reaching out with her racket, she doesn't have 2 hands on the reins. So I'm assuming she could control her horse better if she would keep both her hands on the reins while she's doing all this maneuvering around that she's not doing to the best advantage. So here, when you notice as she turned her horse's head toward that player, the horse's body went away. Now she's let a lot of space get between her and the number 1, and that gives the number 1 a big advantage. You can go towards the number 1 if they're going away from the goal in order to close the space, but it didn't look like she was even trying to close the space. It looked like the number 1 was just getting more and more space. And then if you do turn toward them, or you're heading toward them as if to close the space, you need to be turned crossways to the goal by the time the number 1 gets crossways to the goal. And you see right here, the number 1 is just now getting crossways to the goal, and our number 3 is still facing away from the goal. So our number 3 has let herself get in a very weak position. Now that number 3 should be continually trying to move sideways to get up against her. Look, she's putting the horse's head towards the 1, and the horse's body goes away from the 1. So she's really not improving her position, even as I think she's trying to get her horse to move closer to the 1, but you don't do it by turning their head towards them, because when you turn their head towards them, their body goes away from them, and it's the body that you need up against them to be blocking with their body, not with their head. Here she's gotten a little bit closer, and the number 1 turned away, and our number 3 here does something correctly, that she didn't turn early. The number 1 is just now halfway around the turn, and the number 3 still has plenty of time to turn and beat her, and so our number 3 should now be starting to make her turn. And when she turns, she should be turning on the hind end. As she gets her horse halfway around, she should already have her horse's head turned to the left and pushing his body right up against, over to the right, to get right up against the number 1. And if you noticed, she didn't have her horse's head turned away. As the horse gets halfway around the turn, she's got his head turned to the right, which is the wrong way, and as he takes off, his back end goes off to the left, farther away from the number 1 where she's trying to get him up against. And she's still steering just with one hand, so she's probably not as effective as steering him and placing his body in exactly the correct position as if she would have been if she had both hands on the reins. And the number 1 gets the shot off, and I think makes that goal. Okay, we're watching the blue number 3 here, and you see the blue number 3 didn't do what she's supposed to do in the lineup, and now the black number 3 has just picked up the ball. Of course, they want to go to the left of the screen, and our blue number 3 that's supposed to stop them, now since the black team has possession of the ball, her job begins, and she should be downfield of all the black players, connect with the 1 as soon as possible, and push them towards the sideline. But since she did the wrong thing in the lineup, she's not in a good position to do anything. She actually was in her own player's way to get possession of the ball. The way she went in there by the 3, she cut right in front of where the 2 could have come in there, and was coming in there. Anyhow, she should have turned out, and if she had turned out, she'd have been in a much better position no matter what else happened to the ball. But since she turned in, went in this place, right now the other team has the ball, and our number 3 is way out of position. So she looks like she doesn't even try to speed up to get in front. If she had turned out, even if their number 3 had gotten the ball, when she turned out, if she had turned out, she would have been right up against the 3 and holding the 3 from running the ball down the field to the number 1. And that would have given her team members time to come up and take her place, holding the 3 back up there in the center of the field, and then she would have plenty of time to run down and meet up with the 1. And they go straight in. Nice easy goal. Our 3 never gets back.
Maybe get the ball out of the lineup. She's looking for lyrics. This one should be a straight through. Stephanie's going to try to get her back out there.
We'll be watching the blue 3 this time. That is the black number 3 that's taken a penalty throw from the sideline. That's the blue 3 right there in the bottom of the screen, already up against the number 1. And the black number 3 has just regained possession after a penalty throw. So our blue number 3 shouldn't be between her and the goal. She should be trying to keep her on one side of the field. Okay, our number 3 should already start working the black number 1 to the side of the field. And here she had a chance to right there, but she's not really marking her up away towards any particular direction. Here she tries to get forward of her, maybe to keep her from getting to the middle of the field, but I think just to be up against her to keep her from getting down the field. But you really shouldn't care if they get down the field if you can hold them to the side of the field, and you shouldn't even care if they catch the pass coming out of the end zone or carry the ball. Okay, now that our number 3 is finally right up against their number 1, but here she's kind of gotten in a risky position where she's letting other black players get downfield of her. And it's something you need to be at least aware of, because it doesn't take much to hold you up to make you get behind so you can never catch up. I don't think it happens in this particular case, but if you're in a position like this, you need to be looking around at those other black players to make sure that you can get downfield of them if one of them should break off and come after you. So I'm not sure why the black player that's farthest to the right is continuing marking up that blue player. I guess that's okay. That's not the way I would recommend playing. But she had a pretty easy opportunity to get on our number 3 and slow her up. And if she just slowed her up at all, the black 1 could have been downfield and caught a pass and made a goal. But our blue 3 is now in front of all the black players and is working the number 1 toward the sideline like she's supposed to be doing. But she pushes her too much, puts too much pressure, too much forward, too much trying to keep her from getting down the field, and so she has lost the opportunity to hold the 1 to the side of the field. She had her very close to the side of the field and could have easily kept her that distance all the way in the end zone, but she doesn't, and now the number 1 has opportunity to head back towards the middle of the field. And once again, our number 1 turns her horse's head towards the person she wants to mark up, which turns her horse's body away from them. But she's marking up in a pretty good position here and now headed toward the other side of the field. So she should concentrate now on continuing to push that number 1 to the right side of the field. She's doing a pretty good job there. She gets her into the end zone and then gets in front of her again, letting her turn back to head towards the middle of the field. It's not time for her to catch the ball yet, but whether she's ready to catch the ball or not, our 3 should have stayed back so she wouldn't have wanted to turn away. She just stayed back far enough to almost trick them into continuing going forward. But now the number 1 is turning away and headed back towards the middle of the field. And she wasn't ready for a pass yet, and now our number 3 lost the opportunity to continue holding her to that side of the field, staying between her and the goal until now. And then she jumps forward, and now she's getting into almost like not knowing where to be, but it looks like she may be deciding to try to play between the ball carrier and the number 1. So now our 3 has gotten completely between the ball carrier and the number 1, which is not the way I recommend to play. And the ball carrier is now getting free and making a run towards the end zone, where it looks like they're getting close to time to be trying for a pass into the number 1. So if our 3 doesn't intercept the pass or interfere, keep them from connecting on the pass, she's going to be out of position. So there they made a jump, got in front, and the number 1 has just caught the ball in midfield, in the end zone, and our number 3 is way behind. She's already lost at this position. So from here, the best thing she could do is to turn directly toward the goal and run straight to between the goalposts to possibly interfere with the pass as it goes, or as it's heading right up to the goalposts. But she doesn't. She wanders around along beside her, not even at a very fast pace, and the 1 gets the shot at the goal, and I think she makes this one.
Livy's going to take it. She's going to get a clean bounce. No, not a clean bounce, but she comes up with it anyway. Heather's going to try to stop her. Heather keeps getting in front of her. Minute and a half left on the board to make 3 more points for UK Australia to come back and win this one. It could be done. Janelle Weir's holding up Stephanie, doing a fine job to keep Stephanie from coming to Livy to get the ball away from her. Now she's going to get tag team. Stephanie's going to give her some good wood, but Livy holds on to it. Livy's just trying to get an opening, but she's got blue all over her. Because these ladies' knees are going to be black and blue just like their collars at the end of the day. But
We'll be watching the black number 3 this time, and just sort out who everybody is. It's the orange number 1 on the Palomino horse, and he actually has the ball right now, right by the far 30-yard line. And the black 3 is the black player farthest to the right. And of course they want to score, the orange team wants to score not at the end they're at, but at this opposite end of the field. So our black 3 should be getting downfield of all the orange players, connecting up with the 1 as soon as possible, etc., etc. But you can see right here, he is not downfield of all the orange players. So it would be better for him, instead of picking up the orange number 1 that he's next to, it'd be better for him to just run on down the field to make sure he is in downfield of all the orange players. And he's kind of at a quandary about what to do. So now he had a chance to connect with the 1, but there were still other players behind him, and now he actually has to check up to get past these players, his own player and an orange player that he let get in front of him. if the orange team were on the ball, they would have just, this orange player carrying the ball down the field would have just flipped it over to the 1, right here in the next few steps, while the number 3 is behind and checking up, is going to get behind even farther. But anyhow, he got behind from the very beginning and is now making it a little bit worse. So now he's gotten past them and is speeding back up. But he's looking back. Instead of getting forward of the number 1, he's looking back, hoping to interfere with the pass. And we can't see, he's off screen, and they didn't get the pass off to him when they first went in. So he may have been good and marking them up in the end zone. Now when they come back on the screen, we see the number 1 has gotten back right to the middle of the end zone and is ready to take the pass. Our 3, even though he's let him get to the middle of the end zone, is in a pretty good position between him and the goal and right up against him. But here our 3 makes a tragic mistake by trying to turn toward a player that's close to him. Anytime you turn toward a player, you're going to get behind, and he should know that. And so he should know if he's turning toward them, he needs to really jump out forward. He couldn't make his turn as fast as he can turn because he was so close that other player's horse was in the way. And by the time he gets turned around, that horse is, probably a full stride in front of him. So he really has gotten that far behind and needs to put a whole bunch of effort into catching back up and getting forward of the orange number 1. But now that the 1 has caught the pass, if our 3 thought he could get back up and connect forward of the orange number 1, to prevent him from continuing his turn to make the goal, he could do that. But it looks like he's lost it. And the best thing that the number 3 could do at this point is to turn directly toward the goal and just start running as fast as he can toward the middle of the goalposts and try to interfere with the pass just before it passes between the goalposts, rather than chasing behind the number 1 and staying behind him all the time. But our 3 doesn't try to turn slightly left and run towards the goalpost. In fact, he doesn't try to turn slightly left and get forward of the 1. He just kind of gives up and continues on going to the corner as the number 1 turns and faces the goal unopposed.
Almost into Dan's racket. Dan slaps it down and picks it up off the ground. Throws it off to Rachel. Rachel carrying down the hill for Dan to deliver, or wants to deliver to Dan. Dan's coming up there for the connection. And their black shirts all over that ball. Rachel turning away to get away from some of the pressure. Puts it into Dan's racket. Dan looks at the goal. Nobody's around.
Okay, we'll be watching the black number 3, who's not on the screen quite yet, and the orange team take a penalty throw. There's the black number 3 just showing up on the screen. And he did have, when the orange player was taking the penalty throw, they had the ball, and he should have already been downfield of all the orange players. And he just got past one orange player that was actually trying to hold him up. So he lucked out and didn't get held up too long from that one, but he is still behind the number 3 who's on the Palomino horse. I mean, the number 1 who's on the Palomino horse. So it looks like he realized he's where the 1 is and where he should be, and the 1 here connects with him and controls him all the way up to the end zone. Just because that the number 3 wasn't downfield of the number 1, he really had no control over the one. Right here, the one is turning away from him, so he's going to give him a chance to get back forward and get between him and the goal. We'll see if he does it. But if the one didn't have to turn away to catch that pass, he could have controlled him all the way in and made the goal. Just because he had gotten out of position way up in the beginning, even when the orange number 3 was taking a penalty throw, he wasn't in the correct position and almost had to pay for it with a goal to the orange team. So here our 3 really lucks out that they don't connect on their pass. But here he's trying to turn toward the orange number 1. As that orange number 1 was kind of turning away from him to get the pass, our 3 should have been, first he should have positioned himself a little bit forward, and he's gotten forward of him now, but he did do that. But as soon as he gets forward, he should have been getting up against the number 1. And if the number 1 misses the ball like he did here, he shouldn't be off of him and trying to turn back and go for the ball. He should be flat up against the orange number 1, pushing against him and controlling the number 1 first and then going to get the ball. So he stayed off of him, and here he's turning toward him to get back to the ball. And he looks out again. The ball keeps rolling to where he and the number 1, and he's able to pick it up. So even though he did a couple things wrong and was out of position, the ball ended up going where it just kind of bounced to a position where he could still get it. And so that's good. We won't mention what the number 1 is doing that might be illegal here because we're talking about the number 3.
Number 3, Rachel takes it. Oh, she almost bounced right back into her horse, but she picked it up again. And she's headed down for a connection to Dan. It's up. Bounces off a rack. Dan's racket stays on the ground. And Braxton may have a go at it.
We'll be watching the black number 3 now. And that is the orange number 3 on the white horse that has just picked up the ball. And the orange team wants to score to the right of the screen. Our black 3 is from the left of the screen, second from the left. And you can see he's behind 2 other orange players and pretty much out of position when the orange team gets the ball. So he needs to hustle and get downfield of all the orange players, connect up with the 1 as soon as possible, and start working the 1 toward the sideline. So right there, the orange number 3 has come onto the screen. He's on the Palomino horse, farthest on the left of the screen. And you can see he was even farther out of position than our 3. Our 3 is downfield of him, but not downfield of some of the other players. So our black number 3 should still hustle to get in front of the other orange players first and then start looking for the 1 and try to connect up with the 1. So it looks like he's hurrying up to get in front of everybody. So now he's in front of everybody, and his teammate has decided he could catch their number 1 in midfield. And if the 3 is out of position, that's okay. Our 3 is back in position now. So the appropriate thing to do would be for the black player that has picked up the 1 to pass the orange player off to his number 3 who's down position. So it looks like our black player that was riding off the 1 is checking up like he is supposed to, and it looks like he is doing the correct thing to pass off that orange number 1 to his own player, the black number 3, who is in position to pick him up, as the black, I think that's the black number 1, checks up. And this is a pretty good example of passing a player off. If you didn't understand what I meant by doing that, the black number 1 had control of him, but he needed to give the control over to his number 3. So he checks up, and as he checks up and the orange number 1 continues forward, our black number 3 just slips right in there and picks up the orange number 1 just forward of him where he has control. So sure enough, our number 1 picked him up just like he's supposed to. So that was a very good example of passing a player off to another player. He's picked him up against him, forward of him where he has control, and of course he's forward of all the other players, and now that he's got control of that number 1, he should be working him toward the right sideline. They're pretty close to the middle of the field, slightly to the right of the field, but he's in a position where he should be trying to just keep working him to the sideline all the way down up to the 30, and even after he gets into the 30. So here our black number 3 starts making a mistake. He gets too far forward of him, as if trying to keep him from getting into the end zone or keep between him and the goal, and he should be staying back to let the number 1 into the end zone, but pushing him over to the side. So if our 3 gets too far forward and the orange 1 checks back behind him, he'll be entering the end zone in the middle, and you want to keep them, once you have them headed to one side, you want to keep them continuing toward that one side, getting closer and closer to the side of the field. So now, of course, the 1 isn't in the end zone yet, and our 3 is let him switch sides to go. Now he's pointed toward the left side of the field, even though he's slightly to the right side of the field. So our number 3's job would really be to try to push him over toward the left side of the field. But it looks like our 3 is just happy to be between him and the goal, and it's not time for him to catch a pass yet, so he's not too concerned about being in his good position yet. But if he would stay in his good position, it'd be a lot easier for him, and he wouldn't have to catch up and make up, kind of at the last minute. So looks like our 3 is just happy, just meandering around there because the ball carrier isn't able to throw it yet. But as he's doing that, he's letting the number 1 get between him and the goal. And really, all this time he's spending meandering around, he should be spending trying to improve his position. So now, looks like they're about to make the throw, and it looked like our 3 was about to get forward of the orange number 1 and have him under control, but then he checked back as if maybe to reach across and try to intercept the pass reaching behind the orange 1. And if you want to do that, I would say just don't give up do it without giving up your position. If you have to give up your position, it's more important to be in your correct position than it is to catch the pass or keep them from catching the pass. So there's the pass, and our black player did swing up at it. It looks like the orange number 1 is raising his racket up like he thinks the black player did something wrong. And if he had clicked the orange player's racket across the horse, that would have been wrong. But it doesn't get called, so now it's a loose ball situation in front of them, and our black player is not forward of the orange player where he would have control of the orange player, because he had stayed back to reach behind him. If he had been in his good defensive position and that pass had gone there, he had been controlling the orange player all the way up so the black player could pick up the ball. But now he's not in control. So the orange player controlling our 3 all the way up to the ball, and even if the 3 had gotten too far behind and was being controlled, he should still be up against the number 3. I'm sorry. Our number 3 should be up against the number 1. And since he hadn't picked up the ball yet, trying to push on him, and maybe he won't pick up the ball. But if he does pick up the ball and you're pushing on him, you're already up against him in your good defensive position, ready to start your defense if he does pick it up. But here he's let too much space get between them because he wasn't trying to maintain and ride off the number 1 as the number 1 is going to pick up the ball. So he's still staying too far off and letting more space get between him. And now that the orange player has picked up the ball, there's lots of space. Our number 3, it's okay for him to be facing him at this point as long as he's trying to close the gap. But if that orange player turns back towards the goal, our black number 3 must be crossways to the goal by the time the orange player is crossways to the goal. So he's closing the gap. There's the orange player was crossways to the goal, and our black player was almost crossways to the goal. And what he should have been doing as the orange player is turning it crossways to the goal is coming up sideways to get up and connect with the orange player forward. But you can see here he checks up his horse, so he's not trying to connect forward, and he's checks up his horse and keeps the horse off away from the orange player in order to swing at the racket. So that is an actual mistake. He should have kept both hands on the reins, positioned his horse right up against the front of the orange player's horse, and stopped the horse from moving towards the goal. But he doesn't. He takes a swing, and this time the orange player doesn't take advantage of how far out of position the black player got by continuing forward. He doesn't. He hangs on. The orange player hangs on to the ball, but instead of taking advantage of him being out of position and continuing forward and going on towards the goal, he turns back, giving our black 3 another opportunity to get back in position. So here he makes a fatal mistake. As the orange player was checking up to turn left, our black 3 was checking up but should have been preparing to turn right. He had him stopped. He was in a good defensive position to continue holding him stopped, but instead of turning back to the right and picking him up on the other side, he elects to follow him around the back of the circle to go for a swing at his racket. Of course, if he doesn't get the swing of the racket, if he doesn't get the ball out as he swings at this racket this time, he'll be way out of position. So sure enough, he doesn't get it out, and he's stuck. And he pretty much gives up, and the orange player goes right up to the goal and scores.
In line here, the score is 1-1. It's not 2-0. 1-1, tie ball game. And the orange team come up with the ball after the throw in, headed down the hill. We've got 2 minutes and 15 left on the clock. Rachel's trying to settle things down a little bit. Oh, puts it right past Dan's racket. And Dan picks it up.
Here, watching the black number 3 defend against a penalty throw from right at the top of the D, it looks like. And there's not much you can do in these situations. If they throw it over your head without a reach, which they should easily be able to do, there's not much you can do. The only thing that I try to do sometimes is to not stand in the middle of the goal, but stand over to the side of the goal, about halfway between, about 4 or 5 yards to one side of a goalpost, so that the goal looks open. And sometimes they may not, they don't have you there as a gauge, sometimes they don't throw it high enough, and then you can run up to the goal and get within reach of the ball and knock it off to the side. But there's really not much else you can do to defend against one that goes over your head. So sure enough, this one goes over his head and to the post, and it's a good goal for the orange.
And we have time on.
Okay, we're watching the black number 3. The orange number 1 has just picked up the ball, and the position they're in right now, the black number 3 could just stop, turn around left, and start holding the number 1 right there. But he must, or his job is to stay downfield of all the orange players, connect with the 1 as soon as possible, and working toward the sideline. So he's downfield of all the orange players. It looks like he's looking at the 1 to connect with him, but he is staying too far in front of him to connect. And instead of just waiting for him to come and then going sideways up against him, our number 3 is going forward downfield, actually getting more space between him and the 1. And you want to be closing that space instead of making more space. Well, if you get space, then you give them the opportunity to change sides. And he's already got him where he could hold him very easily way over towards the left side of the field, the position he's in right now. But he gets more space, and now it looks like the number 1, he's letting the number 1 go to his other side. So now if our 3 connects with him, he'll be having to push him over to the right side of the field, and he's almost all the way over the left side of the field. So we have to push him a lot farther. And he's still keeping too much space between him. But here, finally, when he does connect, he connects fairly well, but he is connecting as if he wants to keep the 1 from getting down the field instead of just continuing to drive him over to the right sideline. This time, since the black number 3 has a teammate coming up on his right side, it's not as bad. He should be able to count on his teammate that's coming up on the right to prevent that number 1 from turning away from him to get back to the middle of the field. So it's not so incorrect as long as he's got somebody coming up here on the right side. So he marks him up and the teammate that comes up overrides him, and then our 3 overrides him also. So he had him held where he couldn't get down the field, but at the very least he could have at least held him over to the right side of the field. But since he's overridden him now, the 1 gets to change sides, and now the number 1 gets to head towards the middle of the field to get to the end zone. So our 3 here, he should have connected right back there where he did. He's jumped way too much forward. He's still between the 1 and the goal, but he didn't connect as soon as possible, and he's giving the 1 much more maneuvering room to get past him, where he has a lot of room where he could switch sides back and forth. So the 1's pass it off to the number 3 to carry it down the field, but our number 3's job is still the same. Now the number 1 has switched sides again, so our 3 should be able to, or should be trying to keep the number 1 over now again to the right side of the field. But he's got too much space to count on him at this point, and if he continues going forward, he won't have the 1 committed to one side or another. He needs to be closing that space so he is on one side of the number 1 and pushing him towards the other side of the field. Now he's got the 1 committed all the way to the right, and so he should be trying to keep him all the way to the right. But he's got something else happening here. Another orange player is coming up, which is threatening to get downfield of him. So his appropriate thing to do would be to give up marking up the 1 in order, if that's what it takes, to stay downfield of all the orange players. He doesn't give up marking up the 1, and now the orange number 2 has gotten downfield of him, and he, once again, if he gets caught in this position, he first needs to get downfield of all the orange players before thinking about connecting or looking for the 1. So here the orange number 2 is overridden, and our number 3 has an opportunity to push forward and get downfield of that number 2, which would be all the orange players, even if it means having to go into the end zone. But instead of pushing forward and getting and staying in front of that number 2, he comes back over and heads to kind of deal or block the number 1 again. So in the meantime, now the 2 has caught him again, but this time our 3 is able to connect forward of the number 2, so he won't have an as easy a job, but he should be in a position where he should be able to push the number 2 towards the end zone so our black number 3 can get into the end zone. You can see our black number 3 has his horse's head positioned off to the left, and they're just slightly in front of the orange number 2, so they should be able to push their way on into the end zone. And sure enough, he's able to push into the end zone, and it looks like the number 2 may still be in contact with our number 3 while the number 2 is in the end zone, which should be a penalty. But I don't think it gets called. And the orange team, the orange number 1, didn't take advantage of the help that his number 2 was trying to give him. And so when our black 3 gets into the end zone, the orange number 1 has put himself, or put our number 3 in the ideal defensive position. Now that the orange number 1 is in the end zone, our number 3 has him between him and the goal, almost up against him, and almost in the corner. And the number 1 put our number 3 in that good defensive, excellent defensive position. And then our number 3 blows it. And instead of staying and holding him in the corner, our number 3 switches sides here to try to intercept the pass. And in those instances, if you don't intercept it, you're not between them and the goal, and they should just get the goal. But in this instance, somebody else knocked it down, and now it's a loose ball. Being a loose ball, and our number 3 is not first in line for his team to it, his job is to be marking up a player, and the appropriate player for him to mark up is the number 1 behind him. He can mark him up by just staying between him and the ball. So right now he's kind of doing okay, but he shouldn't be moving away from that number 1 until all of his other teammates have passed up the ball. But our number 3 goes well, abandons the number 1 that he should have been marking up toward the ball, and as it turns out, his team doesn't get it. And when the orange team gets it, now our number 3 is way out of position, and he's realizes he's way out of position. Are the number 1 just sitting in there waiting in the end zone, and they get a pass to him, and our 3 is way too far away to do anything about it.
Daniel reaches down for it, but I don't think he comes up with it. It's in a orange racket. It's the orange number 1, Dan Duhigg, 41 seconds. Watch the time. But he is getting lots of pressure from Braxton. Not letting him get down the field, just like Braxton's supposed to. Dan flips it over to Rachel, let her carry it down the field. Rachel gets past Zach, avoids a little bit of wood from Daniel, takes a turn away from Zach, throws it towards Dan, but Daniel slaps it back to the ground. Rachel comes up with it, back to Dan, up in his racket, shoots,